In March and May of 1835, Joseph Smith received a revelation providing further detail on the organization of the priesthood and of priesthood governance in the church. The revelation was called Instruction on Priesthood. In today's Doctrine and Covenants, it is section 107. The instruction is the Lord's comprehensive organization of the priesthood and of the governing entities within the church. When the Lord finished his explication, he commanded all members to learn their duty and to act in their office. Nothing else, organizationally speaking, was required. The Lord organized the church and the priesthood into specific groupings of priesthood officers. He called these groups quorums and councils. A quorum is a set number of officers or members of an organization which, when reached, is authorized to conduct official business. The English quorum is derived from Latin and means "of whom." The general sense is that a quorum is a subgroup taken out of a larger group. The quorums designated by the Lord in his instruction carry this same meaning. For example, the first presidency, which the Lord calls a quorum, are 3 high priests elected from out of all those holding the office of high priest in the church. According to the Lord's instruction on priesthood, the governing bodies of the church are based upon quorums of priesthood office holders, who are then given callings to serve in these bodies. There are 3 general-level governing bodies, which the Lord calls the spiritual authorities of the church. The quorum designated to serve as the presidency of the church is made up of 3 high priests selected from all those serving in the high priesthood. For clarity's sake, the quorum is 3 high priests, and the calling is member of the presidency of the church. To fill the calling of apostle, a different quorum number is taken from a different priesthood office. In this case, the calling is apostle, and the quorum forming the traveling council is 12 elders. As the name suggests, the quorum of the 70 is 70 elders. There are 2 other general-level organizations called councils, which form quorums equal in authority to the spiritual authorities of the church, the High Council of the Church and the Standing High Councils of the Stakes of Zion. The High Council of the Church is composed of 12 high priests. Each of the standing high councils of a stake mirrors the organization of the general-level high council, with 12 high priests constituting the quorum. The combined membership of all stake high councils forms a quorum of the whole. Each priesthood office, from high priest to deacon, has a presidency over all those in the church who hold that particular office. That is, there are presidencies over all high priests, over all elders, over all priests, over all teachers, and over all deacons, all quorums of the whole. The quorum of high priests represents all high priests in the church and is called the quorum of high priests of the church. This quorum is organized to qualify standing presidents, meaning presidents of stakes. There is also a quorum of the whole composed of the elders within the organized church. These elders are called to be standing ministers within the stakes. Another quorum of the whole is made up of the elders outside the organized church, the traveling elders of the 70. The offices of the Aaronic priesthood are organized in a similar fashion, with a presidency of 3 over a quorum of the whole. The modern church does not recognize quorums of the whole according to priesthood office, nor does it recognize quorums of priesthood office holders at the general level. Melchizedek priesthood office holders are formed into quorums at the stake and ward level. Aaronic priesthood quorums are formed at the ward or branch level. Yet the revelations are clear that there are to be quorums of the whole based upon priesthood office at the general level. In section 124, the Lord proposes candidates for all general level officers. Included in the list are the quorum presidencies for all priesthood offices. Historical records reflect the existence of church-wide priesthood quorums led by a presidency. The minutes of a conference held in the Kirtland Temple in December 1836 record that the authorities of the church were present. Among those church authorities was the president of the elders and his counselors. A General Assembly of the Church convened in August 1835 to review the newly compiled Book of Commandments. The assembly included the presidents of the elders, priests, teachers, and deacons. The pulpits of the Kirtland Temple clearly demonstrate the general level organization of the priesthood offices. presidents of the Melchizedek priesthood offices occupied pulpits directly below the presidency of the high priesthood, the first presidency. The presidents of the Aaronic priesthood offices were in apartments directly below the presiding bishop of the church. In truth, it would not make sense for temple pulpits to be dedicated for the use of local leaders. On the 4th of July, 1838, the cornerstones of the Far West Temple were laid according to what Joseph Smith called the Order of the Priesthood. Along with the presidents of the stake and the bishop, the presidents of the elders and teachers assisted in laying the cornerstones. The Church has redefined the meaning of quorum, both as a general concept and as it is used organizationally in the Church. According to Handbook 2, a quorum is simply an organizational unit defined by priesthood office. Priesthood quorums can consist of any number of office holders up to a specified limit for each office. But this contradicts the basic meaning of quorum, which is defined by a minimum number, not a maximum limit. A quorum is not a quorum until its specified minimum is met. A group of priesthood holders fewer than the required number for a quorum, whether it be 12, 24, 48, or 96, is no more a quorum than the quorum of the 11 or the quorum of the 69. The Church recognizes this principle with regard to the quorum of the 12. When a member dies or is released, a vacancy is created in the quorum. The Church fills the vacancy as quickly as possible in order to complete the required number of members. The early Church understood quorum as a minimum and not as a maximum. When the Church convened a General Assembly to consider canonization of the Book of Commandments, there was a call to order to determine if the proper number to fill the quorums were in attendance. Full quorums were necessary to conduct business. There were times during conferences when there were insufficient numbers to constitute quorums. This prevented business from being conducted. The Lord made it clear that only decisions made by the entire membership of the governing quorums were valid. In certain circumstances, he allowed a majority to be a quorum. In either case, the quorum numbers were minimums for conducting official business. The Church cites the Instruction on Priesthood, section 107, as the basis for maximum quorum limits. But the Lord did not give the quorum numbers as maximums. He gave the numbers in their classical sense, the minimum required to enact business. In every case, the president over an office is to preside over a specified number of members. When the specified number is present, the president is then commanded to sit in council with the quorum of members. The Lord does not indicate that a quorum can be less than the number specified. Each president is required to preside over the number of office holders designated and no fewer. When designated quorums are reached, they form councils, the deliberative and decision-making bodies of the Church. In the gospel of Jesus Christ, the council is the preferred form of governance. It was a council, after all, where the plan of salvation was presented and approved. A council is a group of people who consult together and then make decisions. In the Church of Christ, when quorums are present, councils are established to conduct business. It is not the quorums who conduct the business. Quorums simply allow councils to be formed. It is the councils that conduct the business of the kingdom. The presiding bodies of the church are councils. The Lord informed Joseph Smith, Sidney Rigdon, and Frederick G. Williams that the office of their calling in the First Presidency was to preside in council and set in order the affairs of the church. The Quorum of 12 Apostles form a traveling high council which regulates all the affairs of the church in the nations of the world. At the general level, there is to be a standing high council of the church, whose authority is equal to the traveling high council. At the stake level, there are standing high councils, modeled after the high council at the general level. When quorums of priesthood offices were formed, the presidencies sat in council, meaning that councils were established. Specialized councils are formed to resolve particular needs. The judicial system of the church uses councils to decide cases. When a president of the high priesthood transgresses, he is to be tried by a council of the whole, called the common council of the church. Tithing is to be disposed of by a council composed of 3 governing councils. The primary venue for conducting church business is the conference. The Lord commanded the elders of the church to meet in conference on a quarterly basis to conduct church business. The Lord did allow the conferences to direct or appoint subsequent conferences, but on occasion he directed the timing, conditions, and content of conferences himself. Certain items of business, such as the appointment and ordination of a president of the high priesthood, was to be accomplished at a meeting of the high council of the church or a general conference of the entire church. Conferences are to be primarily business meetings, which is the essence of what conferences are intended to be. They are meetings where the participants confer. Joseph Smith made this point in a general conference held in Orange, Ohio in 1831. The business of this particular General Conference consisted of ordinations to priesthood office and making assignments. The conference also directed the date and location of the next conference. This is in harmony with the Lord's directive for conferences to appoint subsequent conferences. The Church has changed the order of conferences to one of a strict and regimented schedule. Conferences are set in the Handbook of Instructions. General conferences are held twice a year, in April and October. Conferences are no longer allowed to appoint future conferences, contrary to the commandment of the Lord. The Church has replaced the flexible minimum for quarterly conferences given by revelation with a set number and type of conferences directed by higher priesthood authorities. The brethren have changed the very nature of conferences. Originally intended as business meetings, conferences today are venues for inspirational messages. Business is secondary. The only business conducted at a conference at any level, as a practice, is the sustaining of names. This is a pro forma exercise and not true business in the classical sense. There is no conferring in a modern conference. Indeed, by the Church's own admission, the slate of officers is composed before, not during, the conference. Inspirational talks are now the true business of conferences. It is true that conferences from the beginning of the Church did include inspirational and instructional addresses, but these were appointed by the conference itself and were clearly secondary to the business of the conference. In addition to the priesthood quorums and councils instituted by the Lord, the Church, over time, has added non-priesthood organizations called auxiliaries. These auxiliaries include Relief Society, Primary, Sunday School, Young Women, and Young Men. The auxiliaries are not priesthood organizations, but are complementary to the priesthood line organization. They exist primarily to assist the priesthood. But the holy priesthood, after the order of the Son of God, is perfect and eternal. It has the power to perfect the saints on its own. It is through priesthood ordinances that godliness is achieved, and not through the programs of the auxiliaries. The Lord was clear to Joseph Smith. The offices and quorums of the priesthood were given for the perfecting of the saints. He did not give Joseph or the Church auxiliaries to assist. Every auxiliary of the Church, excluding Relief Society, was grafted into the Church after the presidency of Joseph Smith. We must remember that as of 1835, with the revelation called the Instruction on Priesthood, the Church was fully organized. The only thing that remained was for the members to learn their duty. Each of the auxiliaries, primary, Sunday school, young women, and young men, originated outside the church as the result of individual or group efforts and then was adopted by the church as part of its structure. Not one auxiliary was organized by a revelation from the head of the church. It is important to point out that from a historical perspective, there is no evidence, scriptural or otherwise, to suggest that auxiliaries existed in the Church of Jesus Christ in previous dispensations. If the church is a restoration, as is claimed, then there should be parallel organizations in previous iterations of the church, yet there are none to be found. In addition to the auxiliaries, there are other non-priesthood organizations which meet perceived needs within the church. They include single adults, seminary and institutes, scouting, and others. Like the auxiliaries, these organizations were not instituted by the Lord through revelation. The Church considers the Relief Society to be an auxiliary. The Relief Society was organized by Joseph Smith on the 17th of March 1842 as the Female Relief Society of Nauvoo. The Church's claim that the Relief Society is an auxiliary to the priesthood denies the fact that Joseph Smith organized the institution as a holy priesthood organization. The Relief Society Minute Book clearly reflects Joseph's intent. The Church has pushed back on the notion that the Relief Society is to be a true kingdom of priests. It has even gone as far as changing Joseph's words. In the 1919 Relief Society magazine, Joseph was reported to have said the society would operate under the priesthood and not according to the priesthood. This misquote continues to be used as a justification for Relief Society's auxiliary status. The official history of the Church also changed Joseph's words to mask the society's priesthood organization. Joseph's actual words were much different, as the official minutes from the meeting demonstrate. The Church inserted words never spoken by Joseph to ensure the primacy of the Church over the Relief Society and deny its female priesthood. The history also leaves out Joseph's statement that he would make the society a kingdom of priests. Moreover, the Church has carefully avoided making certain statements of Joseph public, statements which cannot be misinterpreted or parsed away. Fortunately, the Joseph Smith papers retain the original record with Joseph Smith's authentic words. He said that the Female Relief Society of Nauvoo would be organized exactly as the Church was organized. When the need arose, the society should ordain deacons, teachers, and other priesthood officers, just as in the Church. As originally organized by Joseph Smith, the Relief Society was to be a select society of virtuous and holy women. Joseph strongly counseled the sisters to screen prospective members, allowing only the most virtuous to become members. He also warned the society that they needed to examine all members and purge out all iniquity. Joseph explained that the blessings from heaven would only flow to the society if iniquity was purged out. The order of the Relief Society is much different in the modern church. The society is no longer selective in its membership. All adult women in the church automatically become members of the Relief Society. No screening process is conducted in the society, nor is it ever purged of iniquity as Joseph counseled. All women in the church, active or not, worthy or not, are always members of Relief Society. In fact, one of the primary responsibilities of the Relief Society is to focus on the activation of less active members. Less active is a euphemism for members who rarely, if ever, attend or participate in church services or activities. Joseph informed the sisters at the organization of the society that he was going to make it a kingdom of priests, just as it was in Enoch's day and in the Apostle Paul's day. The unmistakable inference is that during the time of Enoch and Paul, the sisters were also organized into a kingdom of priests. Joseph intended to install the same organization of female priesthood as it existed in previous dispensations. Joseph further explained that the Lord had promised that Emma would lead the sisters and preside over them. The revelation he read was section 25. According to Joseph, the prophecy was fulfilled with the organization of the Relief Society and Emma's election and ordination to be president. In the same revelation, the Lord called Emma an elect lady. Joseph explained to the sisters that elect lady carried great import and functioned as a title. The prophet read the second epistle of John, in which the apostle called another woman, unidentified, by the same title. The title indicated to both women, Emma and the unnamed woman of John's time, that they were elected, or called as the Lord also termed it, to preside. When Elder John Taylor ordained Sarah M. Cleveland to be Emma's first counselor, he used elect lady as a title of office.